As she mentioned, I'm a sociologist, and so I'm stepping outside my bounds and talking to this group today. And so I like to think that I can take direction. And one of the things that I asked was, well, what can I do that would be really useful to this group? And I was given 3 items that they asked me to address. Some techniques. How can we develop the right message for the audience? Also, using some effective mechanisms for the delivery of those communications. And finally, can I provide some examples from my past research that might be of use? So, of course, my response was, well, as long as it's nothing hard, this will be really easy. But what I did want to approach is, as the first speaker said, I really agreed with a lot of what he shared, and what I really cling on to was that one thing we have to try. I truly believe that. I do agree. It's an impossible task, but we have to try. And so what I intend to share with you today is my ideas and the approaches that I work with in terms of how we try. How can we better achieve some of these goals? And I think you'll find a lot of overlap with some of the things that you've already heard today in terms of the perspective that we're approaching this way. I think the fundamental question we're dealing with is, I put right there at the top. We all know we can provide all kinds of information, but it doesn't seem to change behavior. And there's many, many examples of that. So the issue we're struggling with is why? What's missing? I want to be clear about the assumptions that I'm making when I'm speaking with you today. I really believe that addressing environmental issues has to be an interdisciplinary effort. For a very long time, and I say this with a chip on my shoulder as a social scientist, for a very long time, dealing with environmental topics and environmental issues was not the province of social sciences. But if you stop and consider for a moment, there is no environmental or natural resource problem that is not human-based. It's the very definition of an environmental problem. If it was a natural process, we wouldn't frame it, we wouldn't think of it in that manner. So I think it's a natural collaboration and something we need to continue to engage in more. The social sciences are diverse fields. I approach it, as I said, from this natural resource sociology, and I'll focus my comments today from that perspective. But I wanted to throw out a caveat right from the beginning that I encourage you, as you engage these topics, to work with a variety of social science fields. But again, I think that the framework that I work in does provide some useful knowledge, and we're going to, I hope today, share a little bit about that framework and how it works. And you'll certainly see some elements of a kind of hot topic right now, something called community-based social marketing. Doug Mackenzie Moore is kind of the current guru of that particular school of thought. So, how do we develop these messages? Well, the first place that I begin approaching this is the recognition that social reality is process. It's always changing. What we hear today is going to make our realities, we hope, different at the end. And that's a never-ending process. We heard just a moment ago. You mentioned, 20 years ago, or however long it was, there may not have been the level of concern that there is today about chemical use. Well, that's one example. What that means, though, is we need to be sensitive to that. And so anytime we're developing a communications project, the first thing I believe we need to do is let the audience tell the experts. What do people know? What are the beliefs that are out there? We need to find those things out before we can communicate effectively. How do we do it? Well, that's where social science methods offer some possibilities. And like all research methods, different social science research methods have pros and cons to them. I will speak very broadly to that, and I encourage you to use complementary social research methods, or encourage whoever you're working with to do that, because doing so enables us to capitalize on the strengths of each and address some of the weaknesses of each. And what I'm talking about, if you're a little bit unfamiliar, is we oftentimes group different methods of data collection in social sciences into qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative data is, well, deep and rich. It's stories. How do you feel about pesticides? And you can tell me your tale. You respond openly. In contrast, I could say something like, tell me your level of concern about pesticides on a 0 to 10 scale. And you could check off. The latter gives me a lot of generalizability. I can talk to a lot of different people. I can quantify and show numbers to decision makers. And that has definite advantages. But we're missing part of the picture there. Because there are those who might assert, what does that really tell you? Well, it tells you how many people check a box on the 0 to 10 scale, and not much else. So the way, I believe, to address these concerns is to try and combine research methods in doing it. Now, how do we direct those efforts? I enjoyed the presentations yesterday, and in particular, my attention was drawn to a couple of presentations that really focused on modeling. Dr. Cohen had a real focus on that, as did our EPA visitor. And social science is no different. And so in order to approach these ideas, we need to understand how we think communication works. And make no mistake about it, in developing a theory like this, we're not looking for a theory to explain the world. We're not expecting a theory that's going to tell us exactly what to do. The important point is we need a logic model. We need a framework to systematize our thinking about what we're trying to achieve. And these could range on a wide variety of scales. We might, for instance, be interested in the relationships between beliefs, values, and attitudes. And we might hope, for instance, in our logic model, that, well, it's pretty straightforward. People have beliefs. Those beliefs might influence their values. They apply those values to specific issues in forms of attitudes. And lo and behold, if we can just get some information in the front end of that, behavior might change. It's helpful to have an organizational system like that, but unfortunately for social scientists like myself, we're not that consistent. The reality is these processes, these ideas feed each other. And I wanted to share that again to just point out the goal here is not to have the illusion we're going to get some model that's going to explain human behavior each and every time. Unrealistic, behaviorist process, it's simply not going to happen. The point is considering how these ideas, how these concepts relate to each other will help us do a better job. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we can develop theories that are indeed fairly complex. I am currently working on a project with a number of people in this room where we're working with homeowners in regard to their turf care in an effort to address some water quality issues. And in my part of this project, we applied a specific theory called the theory of planned behavior. I'm not going to dwell too much on the social science depth of this, but I did want to point out there's a lot of research in these kinds of theories and how well supported they are empirically from their application in different scenarios. And I chose this one because, as you can see, in issues of water conservation, actually that was done in the Reno area, Nevada, as well as Park Service burn policies and some agricultural conservation efforts, this model has been shown to work. Now, how does it work? Again, I'm not going to get into this too deeply, but this might represent another end of the spectrum of possibility. And we can gather, this is a very quantitative model, we can gather data through questionnaires and conduct path analysis. And this is actually, we'll in the future set up a path analysis to look at what are the key linchpins. And just so you're aware of how this might work, these are the concepts, and from here we ask about indicators. So for instance, the first thing we need to do is figure out what attitudes about lawn care are really important. And we might have 10 questions that feed into that broad concept of attitudes towards lawn care or something. So using these theoretical models really does help. And the odd thing about being a social scientist that I struggle with is there's a wide perception that I'm a person, I know what no, but the trick is, we all experience a very small place of the world. If you consider, just stop and ask yourself critically, knowing what I'd imagine are the high average education levels present in this room, how often during the course of the day do you interact with people without high school degrees? Or even without college degrees? Or dare I say, if you're really serious, without a graduate degree? Compare that with the reality that only about 25% of the U.S. population has a four-year college degree or more. And only about 7% have a graduate degree. And that should make you step back a little bit and really question, how much do I really know about what people think? That's where that theory comes in, but I want to be clear again, these things are not final answers. A key part of applying this and developing effectively is seeing it as a feedback loop. We need to develop these programs and not end our projects there. Often we put so much work in, we may come up with a communication, hey, I like it, we have a logo, it looks really nice, and oh, we're done. And then we hope something happens. The most effective part of that communication process is the following step. How well did it work? And perhaps the more important question, why did it work? From there, we can redesign our program. And we can use that knowledge to continually try and do a better job on these specific topics.